Hello, welcome again to Frequency Bone Summer Music Connection 10, The Art of the Student, Video 7. And this is in addition to Video 6. It's actually the continuation in a certain kind of way of Video 6, which is concerned about influence. And it was inspired, as was said in Video 6, from an email I got from a doctorate student named Curtis. And if you haven't seen Video 6 yet, I would recommend that you do, because you'll understand what I'm going to say better in this video. Because this is a continuation, as I said, because I brought up a lot of things, and I ended by saying Video 7 will talk about how all of this relates to the art of the student. There are so many influences. There are so many influences. It's like an ocean of influences. A person is influenced in utero. You're influenced by your mother. All that she's processing mentally, physically, emotionally is going into you. The genetics from both sides are going into you. And I believe inside of that, the genetics from the whole beginnings of what human life is about is going into you. The town in which you're raised in, the kind of relationship you have with your parents and your family, your birth order factor, and I believe your astrological signs, okay? Some of what I'm saying you don't believe in, then ignore that part, okay? But I have to say it. And beyond that, what's maybe easier to see is what I said about the family, your family values and how that's instilled with you, how you were treated, different kinds of traumas that we have as human beings. Some people seem to have more traumatic things happen to them, but all sorts of things can add to that, having trauma. Our diet influences us, our chemical states, okay? Are we prone to be more of an emotional type person or more mentally based? Or maybe we have a good balance between the two. There's so much. What got us into playing in the first place? What happened in us that we said, oh, I have to do music? Maybe we said, look, your brother played an instrument, now you got to play an instrument. And look at how good your sister is. Why aren't you that good? Or whatever. Influences. Then you go to school. The influences are huge there. In fact, parents are going, going like this because they're influences that they would love to protect their children from. Right? So there's the amount of influence is just giant. How does this relate to the art of the student? Well, if someone comes and they want to study, oh, I want to play trombone, they say. You don't sit down and say, well, let me go through all the different influences that are going to affect you. You're not going to do that to someone. I certainly wouldn't. Okay? Because at that age, that's too much. At age 18, that could even be too much. When I was 13, and I went to my teacher, Stephen Zelmer, he was an astrologer. One of the things he was. And he said, he was so interested when he heard me play. He said, "When's your birthday?" And I told him, he went, "Oh, a lot of great trombone players were born then in Capricorn." And I was always interested. I started to get very interested in a certain kind of way. Astrology not as the main influence, because there's so many influences that a person processes inside themselves. So I came up with a lot of other things for me that trigger me about why a person might play the way they do. It's just because someone has the same birthday, they could be extremely different. Okay, so it's not a clear-cut thing. But the world does seem to be shrinking in a way, isn't it? Where people are sounding more and more the same. Some of it could be, yes, they're playing different instruments, or they're playing a few instruments now instead of an array of instruments. Yet at the same time, maybe it'll turn out to be, and I'm not a beer person or a wine person, but maybe there's all these little micro companies. Oh, try this trombone. It certainly happened with mouthpieces at a time, where there was just a few, and then it just bubbled. This one did it, this one did it, this one did it. And if famous players that people look up to start playing certain kind of equipment or certain mouthpieces, then certain people who maybe, please don't take this wrong, who look up to these people and maybe don't have enough experience in themselves to go, well, wait a minute, I need to look at other things. I just don't want to play that. They'll jump on board what the majority of people do, or what, the head honchos of the industry and players might say is the important instrument to play on. Sometimes there's part of me that wishes I got to Boston. 1973, I had my Con 8H, not even an F attachment, and I had a 5G, which is not as big as a Greg Black 5G, okay, and all these other 5Gs. And I just, I was doing very well. No one said, what a small sound. No one said this and that. Besides, let's face it, just for the record, big doesn't mean good. Whatever you think big and good and all this stuff is, it's, sorry, just my computer gets very weird. Gotta get it serviced. And so, equipment is equipment. It's not going to make you more musical. It might give you more control to do certain things, which then you could say could add to a certain level of finesse, a certain level of have greater possibility and softer or louder dynamics. Maybe of an articulation that's easier to produce. So sometimes if the machine is easier for the player, that offers maybe space, right? To do more, because they don't have to maybe overly worry or work too hard in a specific kind of way that would be a mental preoccupation. But I actually find in certain ways people are more preoccupied with technique now than maybe they've ever been. And I thought the equipment's getting better and better, so why is everyone more preoccupied with getting greater and greater technique? There's an interesting question. I don't even think I've thought about it that way. I played the Creston. I played Mahler third. Everyone thought it was really strong, really, and on my con when I came to Boston, 1973 out of high school. Played the Creston on it, played all the excerpts on it. I didn't know. I could play fast, I could play slow, I could play really, really loud, I could play really, really soft. Just didn't have a trigger range. And then I got a trigger horn because everyone said, look, you're going to need a trigger. And try a Bach. So I thought, oh, there's great things about the Bach. And then I started to get into it. So I really embraced the whole thing of the Bach trombone for me. And, you know, people said, yes, it sounds, sounds like you can play louder. I don't know if we want you to do that. Or the sound maybe could hold up better. It lost a little bit for me, I think, some of that extra silky kind of warmth that the con could have. And this gets me on a subject right now, speaking of influence, that the different influences come from different manufacturers of different instruments. So now what happens, people want to take the best qualities of what they consider the con and the Bach and merge them somehow. And the best qualities from this one and the best qualities from that one. And what are the great qualities from this one and that one? And make a mouthpiece that has all those various qualities. That it's accurate, that it's resonant, that it is evenness throughout the registers. Has a little bit of a euphonium sound, but has a shimmer of an alto, but you can still tell it's a tenor trombone. This is like cooking. Let's put a little of that, 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 little of that. There's nothing wrong with it. But what starts to concern me and concerned Curtis is, isn't there supposed to be differences? We're not all supposed to sound the same, are we? Anthony Bourdain, God bless his soul, a great cook who took his own life, I don't know, a month or two ago. He said on one of his videos, he said, when you start hearing the word pure or purity too much, there's jackboots right behind. And this is what concerns me. That people will think this is the alignment of great playing. This is the alignment of great playing. And if it's not that, whether it's the jazz people who set the standards, or the classical people who set the standards, you might not get a job. And you might be considered, well, maybe that sounds outdated. Or that's not a really good sound yet. It has too much of this in it. Or too much of that in it. It needs to get more like this. And all the registers need to sound exactly the same. Perhaps at one time, different tones, just like different flora or fauna, come from different parts of the planet because those unique places are not only influenced by temperature, even though it's all a part of it, but the way it's configured, that it might be getting another kind of energy from where it's located on the earth. That might partially have to do with temperature zone, obviously, sure. But more than that, too. What comes from that is different than another part of the world. Different people ate certain foods in China and Japan, different than people in Russia, different than people in Zimbabwe. For obvious reasons, even at the physical level of looking at where they're located geographically and the climate zones, okay, that are so different. And the very nature of the land being so different. And what can grow from that nature of the land. Why are people different colors? Why are all these things coming so differently so they can, whether it's the plant and the animal life, so different? Because those people and those plants and animals from different lands go together. And the music, the mythology, the kinds of religion, the kinds of attitudes perhaps, are different And even in looking at each specific country and place on the planet where there's certain natural physiological differences, okay, where the food would be different and the people's skin and the way they're built would be slightly different, is part of what makes the place so fascinating and a world of total diversity. But no matter who you are and where you're from, you need to eat. You need to have air. You need to be able to go to the bathroom. You're going to protect yourself. You're going to have ways of reproduction. This is for animals and plant life too, obviously. And they're meant for those different places. So why wouldn't the music be different? Which it is. It was naturally totally different. To go with the customs, to go with and what people thought about music, maybe in certain ways, probably was similar, but they could be very different. What would be considered great spiritual music for one country could be considered very odd and weird to someone else from another country and culture. So in my humble view, if it's all based in technique, it's going to crowd out the music. It's going to annihilate. Technique will want to annihilate the music, just like my wife, Dr. Carol Vieira, said. We're crowded out in the name of having this one standard that now is the world norm. I'm not so sure this is a good thing. And at the same time then, people are trying to break out. A lot of great classical players are trying to get into jazz, trying to get into funk, trying to get into the great Latino music that's out there, and trying to find the diversity in the different styles to go beyond it. Maybe they'll realize that their current equipment, being so fine, might not be able to be what's required of having an authenticity in that other style they're trying to produce. It actually might get in the way. People talk about vibrato. Maybe there's a reason why the Russians had fast vibrato. Maybe there was a reason why the French and Italians at one time had a very fast vibrato. It was accepted to have pretty quick vibrato in the big band era of trombone playing. Then classical music tried to simmer it down a little bit. Jacob Reichman, former first trombonist of the Boston Symphony a while back, right? I think he stopped in the early 50s. He had a knee vibrato. Put the trombone up on his knee and he sounded just like a cello. He was Russian and Jewish. Came together in a certain kind of way. He sounded like a singer or a cellist. Beautiful playing. Would his sound be considered beautiful now or just out of date? Can we hear past this superficial thing of what we think in this day and age is a good sound and good technique and see beyond it and not be married to what's current? What's current right now might be distracting from the bigger issue of what art is. And let me also add to this. Just because certain people seem like they can do everything, they actually can't. Okay? Maybe some can technically do more than a lot of people can. And I think there are some people who are really, really versatile. Okay? But what's really moving in you? Do you have a certain kind of music that's in you that needs to come out? And what is the technique for that? Maybe your natural self is the instrument that needs. And what about the soul and the spirit in all of this? Is the new equipment helping our soul and spirit come out of us? Is the mindset of the pedagogy that's going on in many circles open enough to realize that just the overemphasis of technique will take away from the soul and spirit sentiment to actually come through? Or is our mechanical perfection the biggest piece of cholesterol to actually promoting the life of that soul and spirit in each person and their uniqueness within that, to have a place as a wave in the ocean of art? You know, there's a great mentor of mine said, you don't have to be a Mozart to write a melody. And I'll say to that, you don't have to be the greatest virtuoso technician to create music art. So let's see if that will help the students. Remember, in their arts, you can't totally try to be like somebody else. As it says in the great scripture of India, of the Bhagavad Gita, that trying to have the Dharma, which means trying to copy someone else or try to be them, brings great danger. They were speaking about spiritual danger. And if something's going to interfere with moving you to a higher place, literally higher place in art, then that's the wrong kind of technique. So the question arises is, what is great technique in the art of the student and beyond?